Hi there, everyone. This is Rebecca from Square XO, and I'm joined here with Nicole.
Hello.
We are back. We're doing another spoiler special. This time it is going to be for the little indie game called What Remains of Edith Finch. We just want to thank everyone who's listened in so far. We've done quite a few of these now, and it's nice to see that people are enjoying them. So thank you for everyone who's listened in, and feel free to bat ideas around. If there's a particular game you want us to talk about, then just let us know. And if we've played it, we will record about it. Just before we get into this actual episode, we're just going to do a bit of a layout about the show. You can obviously find us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is square_XO. That's where all the reviews, the news, opinion pieces, and this spoiler special will be posted. So keep up on everything on there. Right, this is, as I've said many times now, a spoiler special. So I'm going to issue a spoiler warning. What Remains of Edith Finch is an amazing game, but it's very hard to talk about the game in any sort of way without touching on the big twists, the turns, and the spoilers. So if you've not played What Remains of Edith Finch, if it's something that you're thinking about playing, then please go and play it. It's an amazing game, and it's so much better if you don't know what's going to happen in the end. Spoiler warning is now an issue. Everything from this point on will contain spoilers. So I'm going to throw it over to Nicole. Nicole, what are your initial thoughts and feelings about What Remains of Edith Finch?
Right. So I decided to pick up What Remains of Edith Finch under Becky's recommendation. She was ranting and raving about how good it was, and I've always trusted her judgment with games, and in having a profound love for
So sweet.
That's okay. But yeah, after having kind of always having a profound love for stirring indie titles, it would have been wrong for me not to have played it. So I gave it a go. Overall, I really adored the game. The Finch house freaked me out a little at first, I'll admit. I was half expecting something to jump out at me a good 90% of the time. I was also a tad gutted the experience was over so quickly, being only an hour or so long, but I think it made for more impact. I thought the game was rather unique compared to other poignant walking sims that have come out in recent years. So you look at Everybody's Gone to the Rapture and Firewatch, and I think What Remains of Edith Finch was very kind of distinguished because of its design. I love the idea of having the text wrapped around whatever was on screen as you progress, like the narrative in a kind of subtitle form. I thought that was really clever. It not only made sure you took in all that was said, but it made for a really interesting walking segments that would have been really bland otherwise. It gave you a sense of drive, and it just made you want to read the next part of the tale. I admired how the game felt like one big puzzle as opposed to having puzzle segments. So it felt interesting throughout. It made you eager to explore the house and really uncover every nook and cranny. I remember I was so thrilled to get the trophy for looking through all the peepholes and telescopes on my first playthrough.
Nice. I had to go back and get that.
Really?
Yeah.
No way. Bloody hell. I got that first time and I was like, yeah.
I missed the one overlooking the house, the old house in the sea.
Oh, yeah.
So I looked through all the doors, but not the ones outside.
Dear, tut. But yeah, the game just really kind of invokes that need to thoroughly explore this really eerie house that is set in and uncover its secrets. And as you negotiate all these hidden passageways and cleverly linked rooms, it's really hard not to feel like a kid yourself, which I really loved. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. I think obviously what I'd commend the game for most though was its really relatable stories of the characters, that were in within the game. And I just really wanted to uncover them all and fill in the blanks. The game tackles real life issues like depression and troubles within marriages and whatnot, and the detrimental effects that they have in turn. And I think it made the game far more powerful, the fact that it was relatable. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I won't go too much into the stories now, as we're going to cover the more memorable ones in due course. But the relatability it gave the game the ability to resonate, and I know it definitely has with me. I can't stop thinking about it since. It's a fantastic game. But yeah, what were your thoughts anyway?
I think I have to agree that the house was very daunting. It's the first thing you see. You're walking down this track and you can see it jutting out above the trees. And once you get close to it, it's quite sort of leans over you, and it's quite a scary looking structure. So I too was sort of very unsure about what kind of game I was getting into. I thought, is this going to have horror elements? I'm crawling into the house through the cat flap and everything's dark. Is something going to jump out and scare me? But I think the thing that kind of got my attention immediately, and we did obviously touch on this just a little bit, is that the doors have all been sealed. They've sort of been left as tombs. You know, there's no body in there. It's just the way that they've done it is once someone dies, they just seal their room up and they leave it as it is. And it's sort of
Yeah.
very, I think eerie is the right word. It makes you feel quite uneasy that that room hasn't been touched for, you know, some of the cases of 50 years. And it's just, it's almost, you know, is it a sign of respect for the dead bodies, or is it a sign of fear for whatever is going on? Because obviously the Finches believe that there's a curse following them. So are they trying to seal the curse away? And I do think it's really creative too, that instead of you know, moving house or reusing these rooms, they sort of build upon the house. So this house just looks crazy because it's got structures jutting out all over the place. And once you're at the very, very top, you can tell that it's not really safe.
Yeah.
You get to the top, and all I can think is, this is so unsafe. I would not want to live here. You know, towering and teetering above the land and the sea. Not really ideal, but it makes an amazing centerpiece for the game. I think when people talk about What Remains of Edith Finch, or they think about it, I think the house is probably the first thing that they think of, just because it's so threatening, and it kind of compels the idea that maybe there is a curse, and that you know, it's followed this family, and they now feel like it's attached to the house. They can't leave the house. You know, so it makes you wonder. It's a weird game, because when I try and explain it to people, they say, oh, it sounds a bit morbid, because, as we'll talk about, every single character in the Edith Finch family dies from this curse, but they die, you know, young. They die in unfortunate accidents, you know, illness or parental neglect. And the main question, and we'll talk about this once again later, is this a curse, or is this something else? So it makes you wonder, like, as you go through the game, you have to try and piece together the puzzle and think, you know, is this an honest mistake, or is this something that, you know, just seems too unlikely to be true? Maybe it is a curse. So Edith's journey is all about going back to the house, and she's going back to document what she sees there, because she's pregnant, and she wants her son, as he'll be the sole surviving Finch at the time of his birth, she wants her son to understand where he came from, because she didn't know anything about these stories when she was growing up herself. It's important for her that she can, you know, pass this on to her son, so that he isn't in the dark, and he knows about his family and his brothers and, you know, uncles and the people that Edith never got to know. She wants him to be connected to, even though they've all long died. So I think it's very powerful in that sense. It's really a game that, it's, I say, saying it's so hard to explain, because people just be like, it just sounds morbid. Like, I don't understand how you find it a fun game when it's all about death. It's tricky, but once you play it and you sort of see how the narrative all weaves together, and how powerful the story is, it sort of stays with you, I think, after you finish playing it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that's our initial thoughts. We're going to talk now about our most favourite / moving. There's obviously a lot of stories in the game. The way that it works is that Edith will go into each of their rooms, as Nicole was saying, through hidey holes or through secret basements, and she'll basically uncover these miniature stories. Some of them are 15 minutes long, some are just 30 seconds long, and they sort of tell you how the Finches died, and, you know, how they've been remembered. So Edith will go through and she'll uncover those, and myself and Nicole have, I think we've got a few different favourites. We might have a few that are overlapping, but Nicole, what is one of your most memorable stories in the house?
I'd say for me, the one that I'd say it's the most powerful for me, I think purely because it's the most morbid. That word is going to come up a lot, isn't it? Yes. But yeah, I think the most powerful story for me was Gregory's. So Gregory is Sam and Kay's baby, quite literally a baby. Mm-hmm. He drowns in a bathtub as his mother Kay gets distracted arguing on the phone with her husband Sam. I think the major impact here is the fact that he was the youngest from the Finch family to have died, and the fact it destroyed Sam and Kay's marriage in turn, as they grew to hate each other, presumably, and just not being able to forgive each other for what happened. I just think it's very powerful in that sense, and again, very relatable. They talk about in the divorce paper you read, as you look into the story, as you kind of go to his little tomb or shrine, if you will. And as you play out his story, you see what an imaginative and happy child he was. And obviously, as you play through his story, you're sat in the bathtub and you're playing with his bath toys, and you'll jump in this frog in and out of the water and bringing other toys into the bath. And I think it does so well to show just the pure innocence of the child. And it just, because of that, I think it made it all the more heartbreaking when I come to terms with what was about to happen, because I was a bit confused at first. But then when I saw her go away and it was urging me to jump on the tap, I was like, oh my good God, no, how can this happen?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think its main impact comes from the fact it's something so easily done. We're all guilty of kind of getting so tied up in our own problems that we forget, like, important things. And I think Gregory's story depicts a very extreme example of this. And I think that's why, with me, I was in floods of tears by the end of it.
I think as well, Gregory's story was told very well, because it was told in a letter, but the letter doesn't necessarily say, I'm sorry that our son drowned in the bathtub while you were looking after him. I don't blame you. It sort of goes to talk about Gregory and how happy he was as a baby and how imaginative he was, and how, Sam hopes that he's still happy. So even though it's a really sad tale, and obviously this happens a lot, there is a little hint of positivity in there still. It's a horrible circumstance, but Sam, instead of being okay and saying it was 100% your fault, he sort of goes, but he was happy, and I'd like to think he's still happy now. So I think that made it more powerful than if they just said in a letter, he drowned because it was your fault. So it's very clever like that, because it sort of, it doesn't do anything to lessen the blow, because it's a horrible thing to play through, and it's horrible to watch it unravel. Like you were saying, I was the same. I was playing and I was like, I don't want to keep playing. I was like, is there a way I can skip turning the tap on? Is there a way I can like pull the plug out while I'm here? But it's very powerful because it resonates. In the letter, he's a wonderful imagination, and once the water goes above your head, you sort of transform into a frog, don't you?
Yeah, you do, and you're swimming down to the plug hole.
I
think as well, like, carry on.
No, I was just going to say, they make, it's so weird because it's such a sad scene, but they've got such happy music playing, and all the bath toys are dancing, and it's so strange to play through, but it's just one of those things, isn't it, where, like I was saying, Edith Finch, developers Giant Sparrow, they sort of taint these horrible stories with a little splash of happiness, just to try and make you feel a little less sad about what you're seeing. And then, would you like to carry on with what you were saying?
Oh no, I was just going to say as well, obviously the fact that you're reading like a divorce paper, and the part where like Sam says in his letter that I think Gregory was happy and he'd want you to be happy too. It really does. It not only shows this morbid death, it shows its outwards effects, and I think that's where the impact comes, is the fact that obviously their marriage went spiraling afterwards, and the fact that his mother is not happy, she can't live with herself for what's happened. I think that's what made it really poignant for me, and the fact that was a story that when I played on from that was just, I was waiting for that story to be topped, I think, because it just moved me so much.
So we've discussed this beforehand. We've got 3 favorite stories, or 3 memorable stories. So I'm going to go in with my most memorable story, the way that Nicole's just gone in. I think the story that got me the most was Calvin's. So Calvin is Edie and Sven's son. He is twin brother to Sam, who is father to Gregory. So that's how they link up. Calvin basically is a very young boy, and he has just come back from his sister Barbara's funeral. And instead of being, scared and timid like his other brother Walter was, Calvin sort of decides that he doesn't want to be afraid of anything anymore, and he's going to take control of his life, and he's going to do all the things he wants to do. If there's a risk in it, he'll take the risk just to get through to the adventure. And I think the thing that got me the most about this story was, even before you play out his story, you go into Calvin and Sam's bedroom, and it's a split bedroom. So they're twins, and they have one side each. And Sam's side is all filled with army memorabilia and, like camouflage paint. And then Calvin's is space related. And the thing that got me the most is Calvin's side of the bedroom is just roped off. And it got me that after Calvin died, Sam still had to stay in that bedroom until he was older, and that really got me because can you just imagine? I mean, I've got brothers and sisters, but I don't have a twin, and just having that really close connection with somebody and then it just being severed, I think that was probably one of the things that really made me upset and moved me because I just
Yeah,
thought,
definitely.
how have the game developers managed to make me think all of that just from looking at a rope in a room? Like that really
Yeah,
got
definitely.
me. Once you get into Calvin's story himself, it basically takes place on the swing outside the house. We'll talk about this later, but the swing is in a really weird place. It's a weird place going to be. It's right on the edge of the cliff overlooking the sea. And Calvin's basically swinging on the swing. And the first thing I noticed was that he's got a broken leg. So that immediately told me that he's risky. He, doesn't really mind getting into scrapes and scraps if he can get what he wants. His
Yeah.
narrative is told through a letter by Sam, and it's called How I Want to Remember My Brother. And just little things in it, just like how you were saying with Gregory, when you go to turn the tap on, you just know that what's going to happen to you is inevitable. Because I
Mhm.
think Sam says, my brother said he'd die before he ate another mushroom, and he did. And I just knew this is where Calvin will die. He'll die here. And it's me who's going to go through with it because Calvin wants to swing all the way around the tree. He wants to do a loop. And you're building up the speed, and all the time I was thinking, I want to leave now. I just want to turn my PlayStation off. I want to just leave him sitting on his swing and just leave him like that. Very lengthy Why I Love piece on Square XO itself, where I sort of go into more detail about why Calvin's story moves me so much. But the main proponent was he does end up going all the way around the swing and he flies off. And
Yeah.
all he'd wanted to do, according to his brother in this letter, was to fly. And as he goes over the cliff, you see him fall and then he just sort of takes off. And that's
Yeah.
the same sort of happiness I was talking about that is in Gregory's story. Giant Sparrow obviously know that it's not nice to play through, it's not nice to imagine what's happening, but they've sort of made it's not all bad, as Sam said in his letter, all Calvin wanted to do was fly, and in the end he did fly. So it's a horrible story, and it's horrible to think about it, especially because I have two younger brothers as well, roughly around that age. But it's almost as though Giant Sparrow is saying, look at the positives in every situation, even the really bad ones. Even if
Yeah.
he was just happy for a second, he could do what he's always wanted to do. So I think that's why that one's most memorable for me. It's very harrowing. I think one of our user
Definitely.
thoughts says the same thing. It's a horrible story, um, but it's very powerful. And although Gregory's story um, did also move me, I just couldn't stop thinking about the swing.
Yeah.
One of the peepholes, actually, the very first peephole of the game, you go through the fence and you can see the swing, and it's all wrapped around and it's broken, and that's just a little teaser of what's to come. So I think that got me, and I think as well, like I said, him sharing the room with his brother and his brother having to stay there after he died, just having that section of his room roped off. I think that was really hit me in the guts. That did.
Yeah, because when you think as well, because obviously all the other rooms were shut off as if to kind of keep the pain contained, and obviously his brother didn't have that benefit. He had to sit there and kind of.
Yeah.
But maybe that's why he tried to see the positives, and obviously the fact that his brother, he got to fly. There was some positives in his death,
Yeah.
because maybe that's the only way he could deal with the fact that he had to be there.
Yes, very
if you know
likely.
what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead with your second most memorable or your second favourite?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just going to mention the real cliche here because I think it's probably, I think it tackles probably one of the most important real life issues, which is Lewis's story.
Yeah.
Like I said, it'd be kind of wrong if I didn't mention it. It's a bit of a cliche for this, but it's got to be mentioned. It's one of the best, as I think the gameplay is really clever at portraying mental illness and the wandering of the mind.
Yeah.
So during Lewis's story, you work at a cannery, and he basically ends up decapitating himself in a guillotine after deciding this imaginary life that he'd fabricated was better than his real one. Obviously, they touch upon when you go to his room that he abuses like drugs and stuff, and I think his story is told through a letter from his psychiatrist, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, the gameplay is really clever as you're maneuvering fish into a guillotine whilst at work in this cannery with one analog. I'm sure it's one analog, and then you're moving through this kingdom he's imagined with the other. And it's really clever as you become so engrossed in this story that he's made up in his mind, this place he'd rather be. Whilst on the other hand, you're just completely on autopilot. You forgot about moving the fish. It's just become you're just doing it without realizing because you're so engrossed in this story. And it just draws attention to how easy it is to presume a person is okay by their actions when they're on autopilot, being blissfully unaware of what's going on inside their head. I love how obviously the cannery part slowly fades away as he becomes more and more. He realizes that he wants to be more in this world that he's fabricated, and it's just so effective.
I mean,
it's so good.
It almost like blooms, doesn't it? So you start off with Lewis's story. He's just walking through a black and white maze, and it's a tiny, tiny speck in the corner, and you can still see the fish and the canneries, layout and the machinery. And then by the end of it, you can't see anything. You can just see the fish falling onto your screen, and you instinctively put them all the way to the right and throw them away. It's so effective because so many people have been in that situation, where their minds just completely wander, where you could be doing something boring or something you find tedious, and you just imagine the better place, and every single one of us has done that. So the way they captured it, and I think it's a brilliant way that they've showcased mind wandering and how easy it is to just let yourself slip away into something less painful, or somewhere you'd rather be. I think that they did such a great job of capturing it.
Yeah,
it's very clever. I mean, Lewis's story is one of my favorites, but it's not. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because I saw sort of more sympathy in the younger generation, the younger members of the Finches. Lewis obviously was very troubled, but almost because he was older, it was like it was his decision. Effectively he committed suicide. That was his cause of death. So I do like his story. I think it's very powerful. It's not on my list, which may come as it's a bit weird to some people. I've got a little bit of a different taste, I think, for the stories, but I have to applaud the way that they taught that story, because what a way to end it. His is the last story of the game, like the main family members. You just have Edie after you have Dawn, and then you have Edith herself, but his story is a massive blast, like finale.
I think it kind of brings into light what you mentioned earlier as well about how they try to put a more positive spin on all of them, and at the end of the day, Lewis may have committed suicide, but he was in this kingdom where he was happy. So you'd like to think that he'd gone on there, so maybe that's kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel for that story.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, all the stories are so well done because they're so unique. For something where they could have had the same layout for every single story, they've incorporated the narrative very cleverly in most of them. And the graphics also play a massive part. So there's probably only like one or two stories I'm not the biggest fan of, but most of them I just can't fault. I just think they're great.
Yep, definitely. What's your next one then?
This one may be a bit weird because I've talked to a few people about this, and not many people have said the same thing, but I am really interested by Milton's disappearance.
Oh, yes.
Very different to the rest of the family because everybody else is confirmed deceased. You go up to their doors, they're locked because that person has died. In Milton's case, his door is locked, but he hasn't got a death date on there. It just says, I think his year of birth was 1992 or something like that, early 90s, to nothing. It's just a line. There's nothing there. So it's very interesting the way they handled it, because once you go into his room, you find out that he's a painter. So he's just like Edie. Edie loved painting. And there's gold and black paint splattered all over the floor. And there is a big painting of a door. And then once you go upstairs to the second part of his room, you find a little flip book. And if you play through the flip book, all it will reveal, it's a very short story, it's probably one of the shortest, is that he painted a picture of a man. That painting gave him a magic paintbrush, which he then used to paint a door. And then he went through that door, and that's how it ends. So it's very ambiguous as to where he went, but I did a bit of digging, and I found out that the other game Giant Sparrow have made, which is called The Unfinished Swan, has got very heavy links to Milton. Ian Dallas, who obviously worked on both of the games, says that Milton is the king, not the protagonist in The Unfinished Swan, and he considers it to be canon in the Giant Sparrow universe. So he basically is saying that Milton didn't die. He somehow transported to The Unfinished Swan, and that's where he resides now. I know that that's like an interesting take on it, but then that makes What Remains of Edith Finch have supernatural tendencies, and I'm just not sure how I feel about that. Because
Yeah.
in a way I look at it, I would say, you know, maybe he did run away. Maybe he just ran away from the curse, and maybe he went off to be a painter. I think it's nice that Giant Sparrow have linked these two games together by doing that. Another link is that the music that plays in Milton's room is sort of a variation of the theme that the Unfinished Swan has. So there's a lot of links together. Once you go into his room, if you played both games, once again, play What Remains of Edith Finch and play the Unfinished Swan. Both very good games.
Yeah.
The links there. It sort of is very ambiguous though, and even if you know what Ian Dallas says is true, and he thoroughly believes that that's what he wants people to see, he wants people to play both games and believe that Milton is the king in the Unfinished Swan. It still sort of unsettles me, the idea that he's disappeared. I think just in general disappearances are very unsettling because people can disappear for years and you'll never know where they are, and it seems so eerie to think that he's just disappeared off the face of the earth. He was here and then he was gone. And it says, at the beginning, Edith says that her mum even put posters around, and then she sort of just sealed his room up, almost as if she'd accepted his fate. If she'd thought the curse is adapted and it's taken him another way, so he must have died. But yeah, I was really drawn in by his story because, like I said, it's so different to everyone else's. It's so unfinished in a way. Everyone else is a clear. They died.
Yeah.
And his is, well, he could have died. He could have run away. He could be in the Unfinished Swan as the king. So it's very ambiguous, and I kind of liked that. It made me do a bit of digging, and any video game that sort of, gets you digging deep into the lore and the sort of explanations around it, I think is something that's done a really good job at bringing a player in and sort of getting them hooked. So yeah, Milton's story, like I said, although very different to lots of people's favourites, is one of mine just because of how memorable it is for its differences. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? What's your last one?
Mine was Milton's.
Yeah. Was it the same sort of reasons?
Yeah, it's just the fact that, again, like you say, I don't know whether it was because I think I was slightly annoyed by it because, as you say, it kind of brings in this element of the supernatural, the fact that he's kind of disappeared. And obviously when you start reading into those ties, which you inevitably will, because where, again, as you say, the disappearance is so ambiguous, you feel like you have to fill in that blank because you're thinking, well, he can't just disappear. People don't just disappear. There's always a reason. And after you do some digging, it kind of throws that supernatural element into the balance. And I think in a way that annoys me because I don't believe in the curse, which I'll go on about later.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it was good for, in a way, it makes his death and the game as a whole less morbid because not everyone suffered this tragic end. But I think it also incorporates that element of doubt where you're thinking, is there actually a curse? Like, is it possible that there could be this supernatural element that's seeing all these people to their demise? And I think I loved his story. I thought it was lovely, and I love Easter eggs in games, and I thought that was a lovely tie to another really good game. As you say, go play the Unfinished One if you haven't, because it's absolutely fantastic. But yeah, I don't know. I like that story a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was good in a way that it really toned down the morbidness because he didn't die in some really awful way.
Yeah.
He just disappeared, and I mean that's as frustrating as it is a good thing, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
No, it's very clever. My next one, so like my last one is a bit it's funny because I kind of have two and I like them for different reasons. So I'm going to go through them really quick. My favorite in terms of how you play it is Barbara's story. I think
I hate Barbara's story.
I don't like the story. I think you play it is amazing. So the way you play it is you go into a comic book and you're in this comic book, and I just thought that's such an incredible way of getting a player, into the story. It's not my favorite story. It's probably one of my least favorites, but I had to just mention that the way that they've incorporated the narrative and the art style of the comic book in there. I thought fantastic. I've got to mention that. My memorable ones. Another weird one is Walter.
Yeah.
I really like the really like smaller stories, the ones that don't really have that much of an impact. But I thought Walter's story was really clever because he basically is Edie and Sven's last son, and he witnesses Barbara. Whatever happened to Barbara, he witnesses it because it's not clear if she was murdered or, if her boyfriend abducted her and then killed her. All we know is that her ear was found in the music box, so presume that she met a pretty nasty end. But Walter sees this and he is scarred. He can't stand it anymore. He's terrified of the curse. He believes in it. So he goes and he lives in an underground bunker underneath the house. And I thought Walter's story was really interesting because he lived for such a long time. The way that it works is that only one Finch lives long enough to have children. But because Walter was obviously sealed underground, he made it to his 50s, but he was alone down there for 30 years. He was just on his own.
Yeah.
So basically, he lives a very regulated life. Every day at 12 o'clock, he hears a rumble above him, and then he'll open his can of food, and then he'll go around his day, and he does that every single day. And the way it works is that he says it feels comforting because he's so used to the routine. He says even a monster on the other side of the door seems friendly. And I thought that was such a good quote. I was like, that's so clever because
Yeah.
the routine he's been through in the last 30 years, he's so used to it now, it doesn't frighten him anymore. And then one day he just decides that I'm going to go out. I've had it now. I just want, even if it's one more second of sunlight on my face, I want to be brave. And I just thought it was really powerful. He goes, out of his bunker and he does like a little monologue. And it's probably one of the best monologues in the game where he talks about he doesn't want to be afraid like his brothers and sisters were. He wants to be brave and he wants to go and live his life. It doesn't matter if he only has a week left or a day or a second. I thought that was really clever. And then he walks out of the bunker wall and he ends up on the train tracks, and it's sort of like a moment where you realize what the rumbling was all this time.
Yeah.
It's quite horrifying because he hasn't heard the rumbling in a week, so it stopped and he thought, oh, the monster's gone, the curse is gone, I'm free, I can go out. And you're walking down the train tracks, and I don't know about you, but I tried so hard to walk on the edge of the train
Yeah.
tracks.
Yeah, that's what I
was
did.
like, I want to get off these, I don't feel safe. But yeah, you carry on walking, and he says, I can already feel the sunlight on my face, and then out of nowhere, you hear a horn, and the train obviously hits him and kills him instantly. So it's an interesting one as well because his is the only room that doesn't have like a sealed door. So the actual door where his childhood bedroom is open. That's how you get into the rest of the house. You sort of go through his door, and there's a hidey hole that you crawl through. Walter's memorial is actually outside next to the train tracks where he died. So I thought that was interesting. But I think the thing that got me the most about his story was it was so strange, and we'll talk about this more in the next segment about the curse. Edie sort of, at one point he was Edie's last surviving child, and she didn't do anything to sort of tell him, please come out, it's safe, like we'll look after you. It's almost as though she said, yes, go live downstairs, go live under the house. In her room, there's a copy of a magazine clipping that says there's a mole man living under the Finch house, and she's framed it. So it almost seems as though she's happy to have the publicity
Yeah.
about it, even though you would think that's her son, that's her last remaining child. Walter doesn't know that Sam has died when he comes out. When he goes into the bunker, the only sibling he has left is Calvin and Sam. And I don't know. I know he knows Calvin died, but I don't think he knows Sam died. So you would have thought that Edie would have sort of welcomed him back up and said, please come up here, please live with us. Edith was born at this time, and she had no idea. So I thought that was really powerful because it shows just how incredibly strong fear can be and how far, humans will go to escape something if they think it's set in stone. We'll do whatever we can to try and change our fate. So I thought that was a really powerful story. And even though it's not one of the bigger ones, I thought that one was worth mentioning just because it was very cleverly done, and it sort of hints that Edie might be, and we'll roll straight into this if you're happy, might be, sort of the curse bearer. She might be the one who's pushing it on if there is such a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to talk about the curse now, or the non-curse, as Nicole obviously thinks. Before we get on to that, I do just want to read a quote from Edith Finch. She says, just after she's heard Walter's story, she says, "I thought it was time I heard the stories for myself and find out what happened to everyone else. But now I'm worried these stories might be the problem. Maybe we believe so much in a family curse, we made it real." Cole, do you want to get the ball rolling with your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm really happy actually that you found that quote.
Yep.
Because it, I recall hearing it when I was playing the game, and it really kind of stuck with me because I thought, do you know what, that adequately sums up my thoughts. Like for me personally, I believe that it's not a curse, but that after kind of enduring a few instances of pure bad luck, the Finches kind of presumed there was a curse and started blaming any and all misfortune on that because it was just easier for them to comprehend. I think with that quote, she kind of hits the nail on the head, and I think they wanted to believe so much that their misfortune had a reason that they subconsciously conditioned themselves to be more susceptible to misfortune. For instance, like, I don't know, I swear I've read it somewhere about psychology, but you can kind of condition yourself to behave a certain way, like whether it be through fear or whatever. So I believe that maybe the Finch family, as the generations went on, they just became more careless and, just in thinking, oh wow, we're cursed anyway, wouldn't necessarily put themselves in harm's way, but wouldn't take themselves out of it. So obviously you listen to like some of the stories we've mentioned, and obviously some that we haven't. It was their own stubbornness and carelessness that killed them, not like a curse. If you think about Calvin's story, and I know it's a horrible story, and he had ambitions and he was just a risky kid, but during that story his mum is telling him to come inside. Does he step off the swing and go walk in the house? No, he continues to swing. He's so adamant that he wants to do loops that he puts himself in harm's way. And to me, that doesn't indicate there's a curse, because it was his own doing that put him in harm's way. If he would have got off the swing and walked inside, he wouldn't have gone over the loop. The wind wouldn't have picked up and then alternately thrown him off the cliff. I think that was him. And like for Barbara's story, for instance, I think a lot of that was her stubbornness. She didn't kind of, make herself safe in her room or whatever. I mean, you don't know what necessarily happens to her. But if she didn't go downstairs looking out for her boyfriend, she could have stayed safe for at least a bit longer. But I think with a lot of stories, it's just them being so convinced there is a curse. And like you say, whether that's got something to do with Edie and the fact that she's convinced them all there is a curse, and she constantly brings it into the limelight because she wants the publicity. And because, like you say, it's evident. She's got all these newspaper clippings and everything all framed around the house as if it's something she's proud of, when it shouldn't be, because her family's meeting their demise, and untimely deaths because of it. But yeah, that's what I think anyway. I think it's them putting themselves in harm's way subconsciously, not a curse taking them.
Yeah, I think the way that I look at it, I agree. I don't think there's a curse. I think the way that I saw it was that it was almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy where, they had this idea. Edie was told, when your father sailed across the sea, he brought the curse with him, and that's when it started. So I think that Edie's grown up with all these stories of a curse, and then obviously with Molly, who is her first child, she's the first story you play through. Molly dies because she's locked away by her mother, probably for being naughty, and she's not allowed any dinner. So Molly starts eating all these poisonous things in her bedroom, and she eventually has all these hallucinations where she turns into a shark, a sea monster, and eventually a cat. What else is it? I think an owl.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And she says to her mum, "Please, can I come out now? I'm hungry." And Edie is the first to say, "Stay there, it's too late." So it's interesting because I think if anything, it's sort of more of a form of parental neglect that's maybe just been taken out of hand. So I was looking back. Obviously, both me and Nicole have played the game recently to get the trophies. And when I was in Gregory's section, I did think, for a starter, that water is already too high for him to be left on his own.
Yeah, for a
baby. So I think it may be just little things like that. Why is the swing that Calvin was on so close to the cliff? It's just tiny, tiny things. So yeah, I think that there's probably not a curse. It is probably just like what you were saying, a lot of neglect that has been fueled by the fear of there being a curse, or the fear that they are, destined to die and they're not supposed to take risks. And those who do take risks, look what happens to them. I've watched a video by Joseph Anderson called "The Villain of Edith Finch." It's on YouTube. I will put it in the show notes. It's an amazing video where he goes into why Edie might be the villain of Edith Finch and how she might be fueling all the propaganda for the curse. So if anybody's interested, please go and watch that video. It's amazing. Sort of gave me a lot of insight into this own spoiler cast. But he talks about how, like I was saying, Edie has clippings up, like you've said, and when she really should be. I think if it really was a case of, her feeling like she didn't want any of the attention, she would not keep the clippings shown up. She would take them away, and she wouldn't say yes to interviews. She would want to keep her family secluded and therefore safe. So it's almost like Edie, even if she doesn't believe in a curse, it's like she enjoys the attention of the curse. So even though, her family's been known as, the most unfortunate family in America, she doesn't try and shake that. She almost embraces it, and she tells her kids about it, her grandkids. She basically tells all these stories to a point where Dawn, who's Edith's mum, says, "Don't anymore. My kids are dead because of your stories. They believe in a curse because of what you've told them." So I don't think it's a curse. I think that it's either some sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, or it's just a case of parental neglect, or it's just a case of bad luck. I mean, every single person in the world has bad luck. Like, at one point something bad's going to happen to you, and it'll be unfortunate, and it'll be, oh, that's annoying. Like, that would have been amazing if I'd been here at this time instead of being here. But I think it's just blown out of proportion in this game. All the deaths obviously are so close together, and there's so frequent deaths and so little survivors that you can see Edie piecing together, oh, it must be a curse. So that's my thoughts on it, essentially. So yeah, I think I'm agreeing with you there. But yeah, go and watch that video by Joseph Anderson, not our Joe Anderson. his name's Joseph Anderson. He does loads of reviews and loads of opinion pieces about video games on YouTube. Check that out. I will leave the link in the notes below. So are we going to move on to some thoughts, Nicole?
Yeah, so we actually kind of got more of people's views above questions this week, so we're just kind of going to open up discussion on those. We've got some quite mixed views, actually, which was surprising for both of us, I think, by our responses on Twitter. But we're both really intrigued by them, so we just want to talk about them now. So kicking things off, we have Poo with Eyes, Carl, who says, "I hope you talk at length about why Lewis's story is so perfect in every way. It tells such a great story in such a good way that they really did a good job of conveying the whole mind wandering whilst chopping fish heads off. Honestly, it's one of the best parts in any game I played last year." And well, we both touched upon how good it is, and I hope we have done you justice there, Carl, in kind of talking about how clever the story is. It is just so brilliantly done, and as I say, I think it shows how easy it is for your mind to wander, and at times how that can be dangerous, and how we can unintentionally neglect people when they need that extra bit of care because you just presume they're on autopilot. And sometimes it doesn't hurt to ask someone if they're okay. So like, did you have anything else to add to that, or?
I mean, just touching on what you've just said, I think at one point in the letter the psychiatrist says she spoke to the cannery and they said, oh, but he's doing better than he's ever done before. He's a model employee. So that, once again highlights that he was only doing so good at his job because he was on autopilot. He, obviously went to the cannery and used that as a getaway, and he'd be like, I'm here now. I've got to work here. I've got to chop these fish up, but I can go to my kingdom here as well. So I think at one point it says he stayed at work overnight too. So it was obvious the pull to this fancy location he dreamed of was so strong. And at one point, I think it says he realizes that he's not in some faraway land. He's just Lewis, and he doesn't have anything that this king has, but he thinks he knows a way to get there. And that's obviously where he commits suicide. So it is incredible storytelling, and I think it's such a clever way of showing mind wandering and getting lost in monogamous tasks. I think it's very well done. I've never seen anything like it before in a video game. So I 100% agree with Carl. I think that it's just such a clever mode of storytelling.
Yeah, definitely. So we have our next view is from Let's Go Bulls _24, who says, the bathtub story, in brackets Gregory, is the only time I've ever cried while playing a game in over 28 years. You hear about those tragedies, but it's tough to understand it emotionally. I thought they did a tremendous job conveying that, albeit unfortunate experience. That game is remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned prior, this is one of my favourite stories, just for how shocking it is. As Let's Go Ball says, you hear about these unfortunate events, and what Remains of Edith Finch provides you with a fraction of insight. Obviously, you can never kind of truly comprehend how horrible it is, but it gives you a fraction of insight into the fact it can happen, and kind of how distraught events like these can cause quite detrimental outwards effects, and the fact they can just happen scarily easily. But it made me cry too, alongside most of the game, to be honest. But that story really hit me in the feels, and it will be my favourite story throughout.
Yeah, I think we said when we talked about it earlier, the way that they don't make it so sad and so morbid. They sort of go, it's horrible that we've lost him, but he was such a happy kid. We've never seen such a happy baby, and he'll be happy now. I think that that's sort of, those hard-hitting words that you don't really want to hear because you don't want to embrace the fact they've gone, but at the same time, it's almost a source of comfort knowing that, if they were this happy in life and they had such a vivid and wild imagination, hopefully they're still happy now. So once again, very, very well told, and it's very brave of them, I think, to tackle something like that. That's got to be a decision they didn't take lightly, thinking we want to have one of these deaths to be a baby, a year-old baby. That's got to be a tricky thought.
Yeah, it can cause quite a stir, can't it, if it's done, distastefully. So, but yeah, so like I said prior, we kind of got some really negative views about the game, which we were quite surprised by, because to us it's like a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
But we've got Atlas Shrugged, who says, didn't like the story, felt a lot like Gone Home. Like, she's telling the story about why all the family died, but she never tells me why I should care. I like some of the levels where you play as the family members, like the sea monster, Molly, and the kid on the swing, Calvin. But I kept thinking it was going to be like Resident Evil 7 and something was going to jump out and try to be scary. Maybe it's just me, but I don't understand the hype of it. I agree with this view primarily because I was anticipating jump scares throughout the whole game. It's a really eerie setting. You hear the creaking of the house, and as you mentioned earlier, it's a really poorly built, unstable house. And where it's just been deserted, and you've got all these rooms that essentially act as tombs. It's got quite the atmosphere. It's very dark and eerie. But I think that's one of the stories you probably should have touched upon earlier, is Molly's, in more depth. Because at first it kind of confuses the hell out of you. I think you have to read into that one to understand it a bit better. But I think it was just really clever how you got to play as all these different animals. I think I got very confused when you go from the owl to the shark.
Oh yeah, and
You're just tumbling down the cliff, and you're thinking, okay,
what game am I playing right now? Like, what is this?
I will admit I had doubts at that point, because I thought, okay, is this just going to be really silly the whole way through? But I think it was just meant to be a fun story amongst all the kind of morbidness.
I just want to jump in and just say, I think as well, because these are kids who are telling their stories, obviously Molly's is written in a diary. Some of the stories are quite jarring. You can't always take 100% seriously what the narrators are saying. So I think maybe Molly was just trying to say, I'm hungry as an owl, I'm hungry as a shark, I'm hungry as a sea monster. And and because she'd obviously taken these berries and she'd had fluoride toothpaste, she'd eaten the whole tube, I think that she was probably hallucinating. So it's obviously, that didn't happen. Like, obviously she didn't turn into a sea monster, but I'd like to think that how she was feeling, was just what we played through as, if you know what I mean. But clever. I mean, we've said before, the way that they tell the stories and make them so unique is very well done. And I, like Nicole, also had doubts. I was playing it with Jack and I was like, what am I playing right now? Yeah.
But it is good. But I do agree as well that obviously I think the briefness of the game does make you wonder if you have enough time to truly sympathize and care about the characters that are in it, because they're suffering in awful ways, and you find it hard to care. Like, it's sad and shocking, but it's hard to really care. And I think, like I said with Molly's, I think a lot of it is down to, obviously you have to assume, as you say, it's from her diary, so that the rest is hallucination, but I think they could have used a little bit more explanation.
Yeah.
But yeah, have you got anything more to add for that one?
No, I think I agree. Like with what Alice is saying, where at the beginning it's quite unnerving. You're not really sure what you're getting into. You know, you have the inkling that this house is tombs essentially, so it's a bit unnerving.
Yeah.
I agree. You know, I think I agree that I was worried at some point it was going to be scary. I think the point of the story, obviously, is that she's telling the story, like we said, about her life, so her child has an understanding of what he came from and what his family members were like and how he got to be who he is. So I think that's the point of the story. I think that's why, you know, you're being told it. It's almost like she's writing down what's happening and you're playing through what she's already experienced, if that makes sense. Like, she's already done all this. You're reading in her diaries and you're basically walking in her shoes as she goes through the house and she experiences everything. And she's done it so that her son can basically read through it, because Edith herself does die. She dies in childbirth, so her son is the last remaining Finch, and he has no idea about anything because he's the only one. He doesn't know where he came from, family is, so that's why Edith wrote that journal. So that's what I thought the point of the story was, essentially.
Yeah. Wow. Kind of brings us on to our next kind of more negative view from Ellie Joy Panic. She says, "It totally missed the mark for me. I found the narrative to be predictable and because of that dull. You were never given a reason to care about the characters, and while some of the stories are harrowing, Kelvin's in particular, it's just that. There was no emotional connection to Edith, just a morbid story with no real cohesion. I think the combination of gameplay was wonderful, and from a design perspective it was incredibly interesting. But the narrative fell totally flat in my opinion. So I guess I'd like to invite discussion about why you think the narrative is so good. I honest to God don't understand the hype for it. Look forward to hearing your thoughts." First of all, I just want to give Ellie a shout out, as she's absolutely awesome. She's doing a lot of like downright brilliant work on Assassin's Creed Odyssey at the moment. Yeah. So yeah, go follow her. She's a brilliant person. But for me, I think what I loved about the narrative was the fact it was just brief and, like I said earlier, it's brief and shocking. I understand arguably the game would have had a lot more of an emotional impact if it were drawn out longer to give you an opportunity to emotionally connect with the characters within it. And like at a first glance, it seems to just hand you a family tree and ask you to kind of feel sorry for all their tragic stories. But I think it would resonate less if you had the whole picture and all the insights of the family before these deaths occurred. The fact I came out of the game knowing a little more than I went in knowing makes me crave to fill in the blanks. And knowing I can't do that is why I'm so desperate to just play it again, and it's really stuck with me for that reason, because I know I can't fill in those blanks. And honestly, as you said, I don't think the point of the game is to uncover everything. She's just kind of, I think she's trying to give her child the knowledge that she never had, and hoping that if he has that knowledge that he won't fall to the curse. Because as she says, when she comes to learn all the stories, she doesn't believe there is a curse anymore. I think maybe she thinks if she passes down that knowledge, then her son won't suffer the same fate as everyone else did.
Yeah. But at the same time, at one point, she does say something along the lines where she's like, "I don't even know if I should be writing this. Maybe it'd be better if this all died with me, but I thought you should know about your family and the history you're part of." So basically, it's like she almost maybe does believe in it, but then she's like, "No, I'm going to have this child anyway. I'm going to do what I want to do, even if it is, you know, the thing that will get me in the end."
Yeah.
As well, I just think, so obviously Ellie says that there's no emotional connection to Edith, and I think maybe that's because of the way she reacts to the stories. So she doesn't really show any connection to anything. And firstly, we have to remember that everybody grieves in different ways, but she, a lot of her family, you know, a lot of the people who she's understanding and learning about died years before she was born, or, you know, like Walter, she was obviously alive, but he lived under the house. So their deaths didn't really come as a shock because she didn't know that person. You know, the only ones that really would have properly affected her, you know, are her brothers, Edie, and that's about it. You know, her mum, you know, so those ones she obviously seems quite somber about, but the rest of them, you know, she is quite emotionless, if you know what I mean. And maybe that is her grieving, or maybe that's her not having any connection to this family and sort of looking at it, you know, the way that we'd look at it. You know, if someone told me that their great granddad died, I'd feel sorry for them, but I wouldn't grieve that person, if you know what I mean, because they're so disconnected to me. That's the way that I looked at her, the way she was delivering lines and stuff. You know, she's sort of going through this house and she's understanding all these things about her family, but she's not really acting like that. The only one she doesn't say anything about is Gregory, the baby.
Yeah.
Everyone else she makes a comment about, where she'll just say, you know, this happened when I was 6. I had no idea that this was going on. Or I think for her brother, she says, I wish you could have met Lewis. He was really cool. Gregory, she doesn't say anything. She won't say a thing. And that might resonate with the fact that she's also pregnant and she doesn't want to think about that being a possibility for her child.
Yeah.
But
no, I agree.
I don't know. I honestly cannot tell you. Maybe it's just one of those games where it's got one of those specific narratives where you're just like, I get it.
Yeah.
I just think that the way it was told was very clever, and they did a very good job of transforming something that was, you know, like, as you would say, a morbid story into something a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, thanks to everyone who shared their views for this episode, because we, you know, didn't really get anything for our last one, did we?
No, so thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for, you know, answering to our pleas and giving us something to talk about, because we really love discussing it. And obviously when Rebecca and I saw that there were negative views about a game that we both considered, like I said, a 10 out of 10, I love opening up that discussion and seeing why people didn't like it so much. So, you know, any views are good views. So please get in touch if you either want us to talk about a game or anything within a game. Just get in touch, because we love hearing your thoughts.
Yeah. So that's it. That's the end of our 4th spoiler special. Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Nicole said, get in touch about anything. If you have a game you want, let us know. Thank you very much for listening to this. I think this has been my favourite one. I can't comprehend.
You've been looking forward to it.
Oh, I can't even comprehend how much I love What Remains of Edith Finch. I just think it's a masterpiece, and it makes you think. I think even now, and I must have completed the game last year, just can't get over the fact how good it was. It just stuck with me all this time. So yeah, I mean, nobody should be listening who's not played it yet, because you've just ruined the entire game for yourself. But if you are, and you're one of these people who wants to know what they're getting into before they play a game, have a go at Edith Finch. It's like we're saying, it does touch some, you know, sensitive subjects. It will probably at some point make you feel a bit, oh, that's, you know, that's heart-wrenching, that's close to home, but it's very clever and it does have a good story. Obviously, if you didn't enjoy it, let us know why. I'd still love to talk to more people about their different opinions about the game. If you loved it, let us know why. And make sure you check out that Joseph Anderson video, because it's really good. It explains everything in a lot of detail. So, Nicole, where can everybody find you on Twitter?
My handle is Gamers Delight with this, and it's all lowercase.
Yeah.
And one word.
Yeah. My Twitter handle is Rebecca Stow 97, and as I said earlier, we both write for Square XO, which is Square_XO. So yeah, that's going to be it for today. Thank you everybody for listening. We'll be back in the future with another spoiler special. So thank you for coming on, Nicole.
That's all right. Have fun.
And we'll talk to you guys all later. Bye.
Bye.